Hello everybody, welcome back to another light novel review. Today I'm talking about Tappei Nagatsuki's volume number 2 of ReZero, Starting Life in Another World. Now, if you recall back to volume number 1, our main character Subaru had found himself dropped for no apparent reason into another world. And despite his otaku longings that he would have some kind of superpower or so forth, the only thing that became apparent was that when he died, he returned to a fixed point in time, and he had no control over when that, return point was. It seemed to be random. And the only way for him to escape the loop was, well, to avoid his own death. And we come into the end of volume number 1 where Subaru is pretty badly wounded, having saved Amelia. Now, when we begin this volume, Amelia has taken Subaru to her patron's manor to recuperate from his wounds. In this manor, we meet a couple of very different and interesting characters. The first one being Beatrice, who looks like a lolly girl, but well, it's pretty apparent she's a heck of a lot more than just an average little girl. She's actually the head of, the guardian of the forbidden archives of this manor, because, of course, the manor belongs to a magician. I mean, makes sense, right? Said magician is Lord Roswell. And, of course, for all of you fans of the anime, we have Ram and Ram, the two lovely maids pictured on the front cover. Subaru, of course, is overcome with this sense of joy because he's escaped the loop, he survived, Amelia is safe, and he decides to spend time at the manor to sort of recuperate and, sort of take in this world and try to learn a bit more about how the world functions. Unfortunately, one morning he wakes up and suddenly it's day 1 again. And he enters back into a loop of death, and it's up to him to try and figure out just how he died, why he died, and what he can do to escape the loop. I'm going to be really honest. There was so much hype over the anime of ReZero, and I managed to hold off and not watch the anime, and I waited until the first light novel came out, and I read the first light novel. I liked it well enough. It was decent. But it didn't grab me in a way that I thought, oh, I totally understand why everybody loves this. With this volume, I think I get it. This volume I found to be so much more engaging. The plot seemed a bit tighter. It was certainly much more mysterious. The questions about what was going on and why these events were happening were a real integral part to the story. The new characters, of course, are a lot of fun and very interesting, and each of them has a very unique personality. One of the things I really liked about this volume was the progression of Subaru as a character. Now, first of all, he is far more self-aware of his situation than a lot of other characters that we see in light novels. He isn't really that freaked out, or at least certainly he doesn't act that way on the surface, because to him, he's just living every otaku's dream. And often he makes these offhand, very sarcastic or cocky comments that are poking fun or playing at the idea that this is still just sort of like a game, and this is just like a typical light novel, manga, anime setup. But things change over the course of this book, and I think that, for me, what made it really interesting and really started to invest me in Subaru's character is that in the first book, the loop was about 24 hours or so. I mean, I can't remember exactly, but it was only maybe a day and a half tops. Like, it was not a long period of time. The loops are longer this time, and because Subaru's not in, say, a large city where he's interacting with a number of different characters and so forth, he constantly is interacting with this same small group of characters, which means they're start to form relationships and emotional connections. And this means that Subaru as a character begins to really change and develop in some good and some not so good ways, because as he starts to loop, we get the very dark side of these loops. I mean, I think back to, say, All You Need Is Kill, where certainly the very first loop that he enters is quite traumatic because of how he dies and he doesn't know what's going on. But eventually it becomes sort of a second hat, like, okay, well, this is the day, start over. Oh, gonna start over. Oh, gonna start over. It becomes like a routine almost. But with Subaru, it really doesn't, because, especially in this volume, because he doesn't know what happens. He doesn't know what happened. He doesn't know how he got sent back. And so there's this mystery element in the book, and it heightens that sort of questioning of how's he going to escape if he doesn't even know what he's trying to escape from. And that whole idea of all this time that he has with these characters where he's building relationships and these sort of happy memories and everything else, and how the trauma of having them all erased all of a sudden. And I mean, I can't discuss it, I don't think, too much deeper than that without starting to get into spoilers, which you all know I try to avoid on this channel. But I'm just going to say that by the end of the book, Subaru is a quite different person from where he started at the beginning of the book. And you start to get the idea that a lot of the bravado and cockiness that he shows, in a lot of ways, is kind of an act, and that it's almost like a suit of armor that he wears in order to maintain himself. And I even get sort of the impression, and again, this is just me from reading these books, but I kind of get the impression that this armor of his has been in place longer than just what we've seen in the books. And that now that armor is being broken down, and we're seeing a lot of this raw and traumatic sort of emotions starting to occur to Subaru, and it really is altering him as a character. And I'm very, very interested to see what happens with him in Volume 3, especially as this volume does end on a cliffhanger. So I'll tell you that, at least. If you're one of those people who can't stand cliffhangers, maybe you want to hold out until Volume 3 comes out, but I will warn you right up front, there is a cliffhanger. In terms of the other characters, I wouldn't say that Amelia sees a lot of character development. This book is really about Beatrice, Rem, and Ram. Even Roswell himself, we don't see that much of. Obviously, we see him at very key moments, but in terms of characters and getting to know who they are and learning more about them, it is definitely these two sisters that seem to have some mysterious thing between them. There's lots of little hints that there's things that they're hiding. There's lots of hints that their devotion to Roswell is for a very specific reason. But again, much of that is left a mystery. The same as Beatrice. Her origins are very much left up in the air. But all of these characters are all very unique, and even in terms of how they do their speech patterns in the book, they're very unique, and they're interesting, and we see these different layers of them as we go through the book. In terms of Amelia, even though I wouldn't say we see character development as much from her in this volume, we do find out little tidbits about what she's going through and about the pressures on her. And like, in terms of a second volume, I mean, I've read, of course, now quite a few light novels. In terms of a second volume, I'd say that this book does a lot of things right. We get our main character advancing, changing, growing. We get a improved story that shows that it can use sort of the tropey ideas and that sort of one mechanic, the whole death and repeat thing, that it can use it in a different way that is incredibly effective in driving the plot. There is more world building in this. We find out a lot more about this land that Subaru has found himself in. We find out what Amelia's place in it is, and that hints at a whole other big story that I'm sure will start to play out as we go along. All in all, an excellent volume. I would say that I really understand the hype at this point. I understand why ReZero was such a big hit, because if the volumes continue to improve at the pace that this one did over volume number 1, I can't help but think that this is just going to continue to becoming a phenomenal series. So those are my thoughts on volume number 2 of ReZero. My next video is going to be on volume number 3 of Seraph of the End Gurren Ichinose Catastrophe at 16. This is going to be the final volume of this series, so I'm going to read that for my next video. So if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can check out all of my future light novel reviews, including future volumes of ReZero. I've got links to my old reviews, and I don't just like to read books, I like to write them too. I've got links to those as well. So that's the end of this video. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Till then, bye-bye for now.